All right, everyone, welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn, where Terry, Francesca, and me, Jay Johnson, will be exploring behavioral elements. And this month, we're talking about boundaries. Welcome, Terry. Welcome, Francesca. How are you two doing today?
Fabulous.
I'd like to share that, but I have a boundary around telling people too much, so sorry, couldn't help it.
All right.
Sometimes.
Well, before we jump into today's discussion, Francesca, you always do such a beautiful job with us. Could you give us just a quick reprise of the behavioral elements, the four drives that kind of serve as the foundation of a lot of what we're talking about?
Absolutely. Do you want me to do a little something on whether or not they can say no or just the elements?
Let's just give the primer for the elements and then we're going to go one by one.
I love it. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. For those of you who are new to behavior elements, when this is your first lunch and learn, maybe you've been here a while and you just want a little refresher. This is based off the work of two scientists with Harvard University, and this is on the four core drives as a human being. So we've got the drive to acquire, that's the fire. So that's all about, fast paced, wanting to get the job done, to acquire, to win. And then, of course, we've got the drive to bond. So all about connection, relatability, wanting that that bonding with human beings as we know. And then of course and that's the water. With the air, we've got the drive to learn. So it's all about brainstorming, wanting to, research new ideas, all about learning. And of course that innate drive to want to like the mastery at the end of the day. And then of course with the earth, we've got the drive to defend. So how are we able to come up with systems, structure, that security that we so want innately, and as well the earth element are exceptional at being that stability and organization. So we're going to be talking about these four drives, and of course I'm so excited to hear what these two fine gentlemen have to say about how whether or not they can say no and where our strengths and weaknesses are. So let's get started. Jay, I think you're
Fabulous.
muted.
Yep, I got you. So thank you for that. All right, we are jumping in here. Terry, we're going to start with you because we've got the air element as your primary, the water element as your secondary. So we've got a lot of the collaborative side, and you kind of drew a nuance of 45-year-old Terry versus 55-year-old Terry. Talk to me. Let's talk about 45-year-old Terry. All right, when boundaries were a challenge, what was that experience for you, and how did your air show up at that point in time?
So I have what I would consider a wonderful suite of talents and gifts that I am eager to share and help other people excel with. As a result, I would say yes to things almost any time someone asked. There was no real filter for what made sense for Terry and what didn't make sense for Terry. If it was good for the group or the collective, I was in. And that presented a lot of really cool opportunities. No ifs, ands, or buts. And fortunately, I have relatively boundless energy, so it didn't like suck the life out of me. But at one point, you start to reflect what is actually moving the needle on the things that matter for Terry in this little domicile in which I live. And good Lord Almighty, most of the things that I was doing, while I feel like they helped others, did not necessarily help those closest to me, i.e., wife, i.e., child. And so it became really, really important to get clear on what was going to move the needle and then bounce that off of the Pareto principle and look at, what's the 20% of the stuff that I'm doing that's moving the needle 80% of the way? Let's double down on that and let's not do the other 80% of the stuff. And it's crazy because I'm less busy. My nervous system is more well regulated. I'm clearer. I'm more focused. And the amount of return to the bank account is significant compared to the olden days. So there, is that's straight up. That's what happened.
I love that. And I heard two big things that were maybe boundaries. And I want to check in with the audience and see what they think about these as maybe reason set. The first I heard you say, Terry, was the fear of missing out, right? Like all of these yeses bred new opportunities. There was cool experiences. This led to something fun, or it led to something interesting, or it nourished you in some sort of way. And I think one of the big reasons that we fail to set boundaries is we're worried about what am I going to miss out on? What am I going to lose? So, audience, if that is one of yours, and Terry, you can correct me if that's not a piece of it, but if that's one of yours,
Wasn't.
audience, give us a yes or a no in the chat. Yes, fear of missing out is one that we allow ourselves to do things that maybe we don't want to do, or kind of have a feeling against, or no, it's not. Let's see what you got. All right.
I'm gonna speak to that while the answers are coming in. That was
Cool.
never an issue because I create my own fun and always have,
Mm,
right? So that wasn't the issue. The issue for me was fear of not giving enough. And my
mm.
challenge wasn't necessarily tied to giving. I was really good at the giving. I wasn't really good at the receiving and more specifically giving people a clear path to reciprocate, right?
Okay.
Hey, what do you need, Terry? I'm good. I was always good, right? Even if I was shit, and I don't know if I can say that, but I just did it, so I'm gonna say it again. Shit. I would say I'm fine, I'm good. And so that was not giving the opportunity for others to give back to me was the real boundary that I set.
That's awesome. So that was going to be the second one. I'm drawing a line, and I'm going to go to Francesca after I ask the question to the audience. Audience, tell us, is that more in line with one of the reasons maybe you can't? That you feel bad saying no, or that you're not giving enough, or that you need to be able to support the others around you? Okay, so we're definitely landing on that. Francesca, talk to us. What was because I know that you're pretty good at setting boundaries as well at this point in time. This is a skill. By the way, people, you're hearing this. It is a skill to be developed. It is not something necessarily just innate. It is a skill to be developed. Talk to us about a time, Francesca. What did it look like when maybe you didn't set boundaries as well as you do now?
Thank you, Jay. Absolutely. Well, so for me, being high fire and water, this is a big one. So because my fire wants to move fast, take action, say yes to opportunities. And then, of course, my water comes in. It wants to help people, support people. A big one is not let anyone down. So what that kind of looks like is saying yes quickly and then realizing I've taken on too much. And where this has been hard for me to say no is when I know I can do it, when I care about the person asking, or when I feel like it would make a difference. But what I've really learned is just because I can doesn't mean I should. So, of course, what's really helped in me over the years and asking myself is, does this align with what I'm at, what actually matters right now? And giving myself permission to not respond immediately because my default is just a quick yes. But the pause, of course, is the biggest shift. And I love that Terry said that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Jay just echoed that too. I love it. I love it. I'm glad that landed. So, a little bit of background for all of you, and I getting a little bit vulnerable. So, because I was born in a family that had experienced loss, so born after my brother, given the female version of his name, I grew up in an environment where I kind of innately thought that I was here to kind of fill this void. And I really did believe for such a long time that if I didn't, sustain this happiness or whatever my parents were needing through this grieving process after my brother passed, I kind of had this fear that they would get rid of me. So of course, cue all of the behavioral patterns that follow that: people pleasing, doing too much, just wanting to win at everything. So that way I could, hopefully fill that whatever it was, just to be good enough or worthy to be alive after the loss of my brother. And what's interesting is that Jay brought up a really great point recently, because I always speak to my fire being backed by water. But what's interesting is he brought to note, he goes, Francesca, as much as you have that drive to win, think about why you do it. And the why is always the people. Even though I was exceptional at skating, dance, piano, swimming, you name it. But why did I have that strive to always say yes, to never really have a boundary? I don't know if I even had a personal boundary. Even if something was uncomfortable, I'm like, oh, of course, I'll be there. But it was never because I needed necessarily to win. I wanted the people around me to be proud of me. I wanted to show that I was worthy. And I don't know if any of you in the audience can say this, but put a yes if you relate to this. Personally, for me, my whole life has been predicated on the fact that I never felt like I was worthy or enough just by existing. It was always based on what I could do. And if you feel that, or if you've ever related to that, Angie has a massive yes. I love that. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Judy. This is where my boundary setting really came into play. And quite honestly, in the last 2 years when I really struggled, I was going through a little bit of depression. This is something personally from a relatability standpoint. My boundaries on saying yes completely went out the window. I overpromised so much because I thought that would help with my worthiness. And I really realized coming out of that and being on the other side of that now that I realized I was like, I was on alignment with what I could do and what I was actually promising. So now my boundaries are back aligned. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I'll say I can, but if I can't, it's just a no. So I hope that relates. And thank you, audience, for being vulnerable too. Back to you, Jay.
Yeah, I see a lot of people relating to that. And thank you for sharing that vulnerably, Francesca. I think it's so important. And when we actually look at like where our energy is, what we're feeling, who we are, and what we want to accomplish, that's really where we got to get real with some of these boundaries, because otherwise we are running around and living somebody else's life. And I know one of your favorite quotes is, don't try to be somebody else that's our, or I forget how it goes. I think it's Oscar Wilde. It's like, don't try to be somebody else. It's already taken, or something of that nature. I totally just butchered it. He's probably rolling over in his grave. But I love that you bring that into the space, because in so many ways in which we say yes or no is context dependent upon our perceptions of how are other people going to feel about the yes or the no. And that is something that we can't take ownership of individually. I think we'll get to that. I'm gonna pop back to one thing that Terry said. I'll share mine with you as a high fire. Because I used to be very, 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 very bad. Probably even I don't want to say let's race to the bottom here, but I may have been worse than both of you in my saying yes. Okay, and I'll share where that maybe comes from. But Terry, you said something that I find to be super interesting. This is actually something I'm working with my therapist on, is I have been told I have an idea allergy. That's what they called it, an idea allergy to letting people help me. My independence streak is absolutely ridiculous. And, Francesca can attest to this. I built an outdoor kitchen that's 16 foot tall, 20 foot wide, and 8 foot, big 6x6s. I did it in a weekend without asking for any help. Francesca did help on a couple of occasions, coming out and just holding the ladder, making sure that I wasn't falling on my back or anything else. But I have an idea allergy. I never even occurred to me to ask for help for something for myself. And I am not a high water. So that independent streak can be, I don't want to bother somebody, but it can also just be like, I'll do it myself. And I think that's where my lack of, yeah, exactly. That's where my lack of, yeah. So Camille, you feel that and that's something where it's just like, whether I don't want to bother somebody else or I'm going to prove that I can do this myself, I am learning to accept help. Now, if I'm doing dishes and Francesca says, "Hey, can I help you?" It's a quick, yeah, grab a towel, rather than before I'd have been like, "No, go sit down, go enjoy yourself. I got this. Don't do it." And when we start looking at that acceptance of help, it actually gives us a different perspective on setting boundaries as well. Here's my complex. It was the hero complex. If I was asked, I wanted to be the hero. Yeah, I can do that. Of course, I can come help you move all of your stuff this weekend. Yes, I'll be happy to go do that for you at no cost and at the cost of 16 hours of my time. Sure, I would love to come. And it was just thing after thing, because the validation aspect of it, maybe the validation of like, wow, I'm being invited to the prom as the subject matter expert, or hey, I'm being asked to come into this space and do something that, nobody else can do. So there's a large part of ego from the fireside. And I don't mean ego in so much as like I'm better than somebody else, but it's a validation of, wow, I've worked really hard and somebody's now seeing that and wanting that or needing that, or hey, I have these attributes and somebody's validating those attributes for myself. um yeah, I might have mixed two analogies there. I do that sometimes. But with that being said, so the hero complex, I think, is something that stopped me from being able to say no for a very, very long time. And I've transitioned out of that phase. I've grown up, as it sounds. But it is something that I found some pretty unique ways to do that. I heard a couple of things that were bounced back and forth. Francesca, I think it was you that mentioned delaying. Was it you? Am I correct in that? Did you mention the delay? Can you talk about this? I find this to be one of the number one, and Terry, I want you to comment on it too, but Francesca, lead us off. For those of you that have a difficulty setting a boundary or even feeling bad about setting a boundary, I want you to hear this tactic because I think it is one of the most powerful and one of the most important things for us to do to uphold our boundaries. Francesca, lead that off, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. And it was one of those things, right? Like, especially if Jay talks about, just because we're low in an element doesn't mean we're bad and doesn't mean that we don't experience it, right? So even though my lowest elements drive to defend the earth, same with Terry, same with Jay, we may or may not all have that in common. But at the same time, it's kind of like that proverbial saber-toothed tiger when it comes in the room and we feel that perceivable threat. It could be stress, it could be a deadline, it could be we think someone's upset with us, whatever that is, that drive to defend kicks in. And unfortunately, our amygdala pops in. That's a part of our brain that kind of scans and detects for threat versus our prefrontal cortex. That's kind of like that operating system that keeps us calm and cool, collected, helps us pause, make those rational decisions. But of course, sometimes there's those moments where our boss will ask us something and our amygdala pops in. We're like, we have to do it. We can't let him down. And that's where the quick yes comes in, or whatever that may be. So it's something as simple as just taking that 2 second pause. And maybe it needs to be a 10 second pause, but even just 2 seconds, just practicing breathing in for two and then exhaling out for four. Something as simple as that, or breathing in for two, holding for two, and breathing out for two. Just that pause. And this could be that you get an email in and you're like, and your nervous system kind of goes into gets hijacked, your heart rate elevates. Just breathe in for two, hold for two, breathe out before you choose to respond. And that's going to be when someone asks you a question or can you do this? It's kind of like when Jay says in terms of the moving analogy. Just because someone says, hey, Camille, I want you to come and help me move on Saturday. And our drive to bond kicks in, and we're like, well, I have to because, Tara has been the most amazing friend for 13 years and blah, blah, blah. But maybe Camille is just recovering from 6 weeks of surgery and she can't. It doesn't mean we have to say no. It can be a yes and. Hi, Tara. I would love to be able to come help you move. I can't on Saturday. But what I am going to do is I'm going to send you 2 pizzas and hopefully that helps, feed any of the people that are able to help you move. There's some kind of, compromise that we can make versus just saying that quick yes. So that's the 2 second pause. It can be a really powerful tool just to get that amygdala offline and put that prefrontal cortex back in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I love that, Francesca. And that second part that you were talking about, the shifting, where it's like, hey, somebody's asking me. All right, that is something I'm going to go back to that in a little bit, but I want to hear from Terry on the pausing question. Terry, do you take, because you make pretty quick decisions as an heir, as I know as an heir, you're generally like, you got a pretty good indication of whether you're going to go somewhere or anything else. Do you take a pause before you make those decisions on some of those, or what does that look like for you?
I didn't. I do now. And now it's take the evening. Right.
Mm,
And so there's an emotional guidance system, and you both have heard me talk about the four minds that I check in: gut mind, heart mind, head mind, cosmic mind. Right. And so if all four of those are in alignment, it's easy yes. Right. It's an easy yes. When they're out of alignment, I trust cosmos first, I trust gut second. I trust head third. I trust heart dead ass last, right? And it's because that one has screwed most of us over more than anything else. But the pause that Francesca is talking about, that's the difference between formulating a response to something and reacting to something. And when we live our lives in a reactionary way, decisions aren't as clear, they're not as defensible, and they're usually not as directionally accurate as they would be if we had a response to the stimuli. And so that pause gives us time to check in, however it is that you check in. I shared my framework, but hopefully you have one or are developing one on your own that you trust, that you believe in, and that you know works for you.
I love that, Terry. And it's funny because I was literally just talking about decision making today in some management training. And one of the key things to making better decisions is that sort of being able to take a step back. So, Francesca, I'm glad that you brought this concept up. I'll share with you from a fire perspective. Oftentimes, like I said, the decisions are lightning quick. And the difference for me in decision making and boundary setting and everything else like that really was coming from getting very good at particular language. That sounds like a really interesting opportunity. Give me 5 minutes and let me think about that and make sure that it aligns with what I'm trying to accomplish. Or give me 5 minutes and let me consider that to make sure that I'm going to be able to follow through on this commitment. This is something, and I'm going to shift it just for a second here before we kind of go into some additional boundary setting tactics. I got good at that language, which then in turn made me think, how many times am I asking somebody to do something that they're just saying yes because that's what I was doing, that they needed to take 5 minutes? So for those of you that need some accountability into your practice, I want you to think about it, because if it was true for me, if it was true for Terry, if it was true for Francesca, it's probably true for a number of people out there that they make snap reactions rather than responses and decisions. So the next time that you're worried about accountability, somebody following through, somebody actually doing what they said that they're going to do, and you're asking them to make a decision, give them the 5 minutes. Hey, thank you for immediately agreeing to this, but I really want you to take 5 minutes because this is important to me. Take 5 minutes, check your calendar, really make sure that this is aligned before you say yes. Because if you say yes, I'm going to really be looking to, expect that you're going to be able to help. I want you to take 5 minutes for you to really think through, is this something that you can support me on? If you give somebody else that 5 minutes and then they screw it up, now you have full rights to be really, really angry. Otherwise, you could be stepping into the human trap of what we all do, is saying yes, and then 5 minutes later regretting, going, why did I just say yes to going to that party? Why did I just commit to that report? Why did I just say yes to that event? Or whatever it is. So if you're making an ask, consider offering that. Take 5 minutes to really think this through, because if you commit to this, I'm expecting you to show up. And I
I'd
think that
give
that can be
people
a
a
powerful.
day, right?
Yeah,
Really
as long as possible.
take some time because it matters, right? And our commitments that we make to others are super important. It's interesting. Our commitments that we make to ourselves, we'll let slide a little bit. But when we make commitments to others, man, that's a whole nother level that we need to make sure that we deliver upon, and I've been guilty of good enough delivery, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about yard work or putting a conversation together or a proposal together. That's good enough. I'll just send it. Yeah, that's not really ever good enough. And so we need to make sure that if we're going to commit, we're going to not just deliver, but we're going to deliver in a way that knocks their socks off.
Yeah, I love that, Terry. So I did want to go back to something that was in the chat a little bit ago. And team that's listening in, if you've got questions, if you've got some thoughts, toss that into the chat. We love to hear from you. We love the interaction. So please, 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 if you've got questions, throw them in there. There are no bad questions here. We will explore them. But I did want to acknowledge, Cheryl had said, I love helping others. It's a feel-good moment for me. Sometimes we have to say no and stick with it, etc. Okay. So maybe this is one of the questions of, we've set a boundary. but then we feel a lot of pressure towards that boundary. We feel like, oh gosh, I said no, but now I'm not feeling good about it. Or I said no, and then they came back and asked again and again and again. Because I've been in a situation where it's like, this is a hard no, hard stop. This is not going to change. And then, sure enough, a week later, there's the ask again. There's the ask again. So let's maybe think about that, whether we're in a position of we've drawn a boundary. Let's say we successfully had at least a partial boundary drawn, and that boundary is then tested. What have you done? And maybe let's start with you, Francesca. What is your thoughts? How do you manage that, or how do you keep that boundary when it seems like there's maybe environmental pressures, peer pressures, social pressures, work pressures, internal pressures to help? What do you do to sort of overcome those? I think that'd be an interesting thought.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. I would say it really depends on the boundary. So just one personally, kind of going back to like my childhood, because my brother, because of the way he passed, it was from a drunk driver. So ever since I was little, a boundary that I just innately made at like the age of 4 years old is like I might have one drink here and there, but I just had never wanted to get drunk because I always wanted to be in control, and I always wanted to be that DD that could drive everyone home. So that way that would never have to happen to someone else like it did to my brother. And in the midst of all of this, that was just a boundary that I kept. So it was just such an easy one. Here's the thing, it's because I was so deeply rooted to the purpose and the why. It didn't matter who was drinking or what part, like whatever environment, gala, whatever I was at. It was just so easy for me to go, I'm okay. And so, and everyone's got their own personal preference on that, but that was deeply rooted to my why. And I think that comes down to it. There's been times in my life where I haven't been good at boundaries. Like if my parents were like, "Oh, Francesca, do you mind doing this?" Even though I was already taxed, I already felt like I was way too much on my plate. I would just say yes, but I wasn't deeply rooted to the why. And now the why is I need to take care of me and fill my cup so I can fill everyone else's cup. And there has been moments where I've said, "Mom, I would love to do that for you and Dad. I need to postpone that to the following week so that way I can properly, adequately fill up my cup so I can be there for you and Dad because I don't want to be there at 20%. I want my battery to be at 100, even 80% so I can really fill yours and Dad's cup while he's recovering from his surgery, as an example." So I think the more that we're rooted to the why, that's where the boundary gets stronger. And it's been at points where I haven't valued myself and my worth enough that I went, "Oh, yeah, of course, sounds good. Of course, I'll do that. Of course, I'll do that." And I was just the yes man. But who was I really serving at that point? No one, because they're not getting my best self. So it's really just coming back to, am I fulfilling my purpose and my why? If you've ever related to that, please put that in the chat. Jay and I and Terry talk about this all the time. One of the three main causes of burnout is isolation, resentment, and your lack of purpose. So, and oddly enough, if you lack that purpose, and of course, resentment comes in and you just feel isolated, it's a vicious trap. So, if you relate to that at any point, put a little yes in the chat and I'll pass the baton back to Jay or Terry.
Yeah, I love that. Getting to that why is definitely motivating. And when you have something, and thank you for sharing that sort of that personal background. That's obviously a really strong and compelling why for how you choose to show up. And it makes the decision a lot easier when you're in the moment of somebody saying, "Here, Francesca, have these 15 drinks." It's just like, no, I've already got that why in my chest. I know why I'm here. I know what it is. So it's such a powerful insight. Terry, what are your thoughts?
I check in, right? I feel like our boundaries, while they should be static and immovable, they're not. That's not real life because everything's a balancing act. And so, like Francesca said, it can be situational. So, but let's fast forward to the point where keeping the boundary matters more than appeasing the person or the situation. In that scenario, it's time to figure out what is your desired outcome of having the conversation around the boundary set. If it's to reestablish the boundary, that's fairly easy, fairly low energy. If it's to reset the expectation, Francesca used the example of, I can't do this week, but I'd love to be there for you next week, then that becomes super important. But the key is the communication and how we go about it. We have to not lose respect for ourselves when we're trying to please so many other people. So by establishing, hey, listen, I hope you can relate or understand this, but I have a very strict boundary that I've set for me around this situation. And in doing this, I would be crossing that boundary. And I don't think either one of us want me to do that. And try and get that level of buy-in from the person. And most normal, rational human beings will be like, oh, yeah, gosh, I didn't even know it was going to be like that for you. No worries. I'll figure out a different way. Right. Or, I can't do this that way, but I could do this, or this. Would either of those be sufficient? So sometimes when boundaries are met or not met, excuse me, you present alternatives that align to your boundaries and are still useful. Always think that's the best way to go. Alternatives matter.
Yeah, I love that. Negotiating is something that I think a lot of us are afraid to do. And when we get into a boundary situation, we don't even think like, here's the beauty of it. Even if you do like, give me a quick yes or no in the chat. Are you a negotiator? Will you haggle? Will you bargain? Will you, you go to the bazaar and it says $5 and you want it for $4.51. Any negotiators out there? I love negotiating, as you probably guessed. Let's just say it's a fire, right? So I see some no's. I'm saying no's. You're paying full price. I have to send Francesca, like, go away from the table. Let me do the negotiating. So, but when it comes to that negotiation, a lot of times we think about negotiations really only occurring around things like money. But the reality is we are perpetually negotiating. For all of you that say you're not negotiators, I want you to think about whether or not you've negotiated what Netflix show you're going to watch, whether you've negotiated what you're going to have for dinner, what vegetables going to be included, whether you've negotiated what movie you're going to go see with your friends, or what bar you're going to go to, or what restaurant you want to check out first or second or third, or what's your vacation. You negotiate all the time. It's not negotiation that you're afraid of, it's the financial question. We can have an entire conversation about finances and the elements, and maybe that's one for the future. But here's the thing that people don't negotiate enough: they don't negotiate their time. And I saw it earlier in there, and I want to call out Bo's comment earlier. What he had said was, and this was right after Cheryl's comment, defining can is really difficult, right? Well, I'm capable of it, but it's gonna come at a cost. Everything that you say yes to comes at the cost of no to something else. If you say yes to taking on this assignment, you are saying no to something else, or getting something else done with high quality or high value. If you say yes to staying after your work hours, you're saying no to time with your family, your friends, or whatever that is. If you say yes to Netflix, you're saying no to reading that book, going to the gym, going to do whatever it is. If we start categorizing these are negotiable items, but what I'm saying yes to comes at a negotiated cost of saying no to something else. And I think that is just so important when we start really taking into account the most important resource that all of us have is time, and we fail to negotiate it. And that is something that I hope sticks for everybody. Francesca, I saw you raise your hand. So,
Thanks, Jay. There was just something that, and Jay kind of made me think of this too, but something Terry said sparked a little thought for me. And I think, we're getting very focused on when people ask us to do something, but Jay also just kind of lightly touched on this when it comes to our time. These boundaries come into play too in terms of who gets our time. Like, ever have those moments, especially us waters, that we give and we're really empathetic and we give our heart and whatever. But those moments where you send a message, maybe it's to a friend or whatever, but we put a lot of effort, energy, time, and we just don't feel like that's being reciprocated. That's also a boundary that we can start to keep and think about, because the people that we surround ourselves are so important. The five people that we spend most of our time with are who influence who we're going to become. So that's also a boundary I just wanted to note in there, because I know we have a very high amount of waters in here, at least a lot of elements that are backed by water. And I wanted to bring that up because our battery gets drained a lot too when we're giving, and we're not in a reciprocal type of, maybe it's a friendship or whatever that may be, but just being mindful of, maybe it's that boundary of, I had an example of this last week where I'm like, you know what, there's one particular friend, I love her, she's a wonderful human, but we might not be on the same page when it comes to communication. And that's when I kind of just took that step back as a boundary, because I was giving so much of my time to make sure she was okay. And but there's not that balance, and that's where we can make that boundary to fill our own cup first. So I thought I would just mention that because that might be a relatable point.
No, it's a great point. And something that you said really made me feel good is that, the five people that you spend the most time with, I'm pretty glad I spend a lot of time with you and Terry. So that makes me very, very happy. Maybe I'll be a better person someday. So I wanted to mention something though, and as it relates to this time, and kudos on setting that boundary, because what we have to do is make sure that this is something I've heard you say, Francesca, and I want to iterate it out here because I think this is important. A boundary is not against someone else, it's for you. And when you are setting a boundary, you are not setting it against all of the external pressures. You're setting it for yourself. And you can use this language when you said it. Hey, Terry, I'm not setting this boundary against you. I'm setting this for myself. And I know you care about me as a human being. You do not want me going into burnout, to stress, to anxiety, to miss my assignments, to lose my job, because if I do, I'm going to come live on your couch. So this boundary is not against you. It's really about making sure that I'm safe or I'm protected. And I know that matters to you. That's the kind of language that when we negotiate, we can shift part of that perspective. Because here's the other thing that I'm going to say, and I'm hoping maybe this is a little bit of a mic drop moment for some of you out there that are not negotiating time. If you pick up a clock, you are not, as far as I know, unless you have some of the like, some of those superpowers, you can't make that clock have 25 hours. You can't make that clock have 23 hours. So the only thing that you are in control of is what you can do with the time that's in that clock. If you are feeling stressed out of time, check your boundaries. Don't check the time. The time's not going to change. Check your boundaries. It's your decisions that are putting you in those places. So, with that being said, Terry, what are your thoughts in terms of? I want to ask this question. Um, when you're thinking about when you're thinking about walking into a space, because I believe here's something that I think that people have. We avoid going to some places because we know we're going to get asked something. Like, oh, I do not want to go to this work party. I know what they are going to ask me to sing the national anthem, and I do not want to do that. Okay. We get anxiety before we've even been asked, before we even walked into a space, before we've had to try to set a boundary. Have you ever been in that position, Terry? What does that look like? And what are you thinking when you start to get a little of that, like, I don't want to go to Uncle John's Thanksgiving because he's always going to ask me to do blank. What does that feel like for you, Terry?
I made a fairly strict rule or a boundary, as it were, for myself years ago to spend very, very little time or energy worrying about future events that may or may not happen, or even more, having regrets over things that could have been done differently from the past. So I don't live in that world, to be perfectly honest, because I don't allow myself to live in that world. Hypothetically, if it were to happen, right, if something's going to create a level of anxiety for me, and there are situations where it's like it's a known thing that it's gonna happen. Um, I either figure out how to best deal with it or just avoid it altogether. Because if it's going to cause me anxiety and it's not something that's going to bring me value or benefit, um, not doing it. And I wrote a book on mindset matters a couple of years ago, and it was really to figure out what actually is important. How do we prioritize the things we do and the person we're being so we can stay in alignment on things just like this? And, we've got this tiers, right? Money. Is it making money? That's an important tier. Is it serving our loved ones? That's an important tier. Am I going to learn something of value or useful? That's an important tier. Am I going to share or give something of value? Equally important. So those things occasionally will get into conflict. And now I got to figure out which one of these four tiers is more important. But if it's things that don't fit into those four tiers, man, it's such an easy, not today or no, as it may be, um, because of the time I spent figuring out what matters most to me and my life. And I encourage y'all, if you haven't really sat down and figured out what those true priorities are, like that might be the most useful exercise one could engage in.
I love that, Terry. And the prioritization, every time I hear that word, it really does call into question because I have to check what is my priority for today. And you both know that I use the Ivy Lee method. Here's my six priorities of today. If I get these done, everything else is bonus. But these are the six must have non negotiables. So, Francesca, it's kind of same question to you. And I saw Caitlin's comment in the chat, skipped a party to avoid having to explain or cut yourself off from some kind of place, exactly what we're talking about, maintaining the priorities. But go ahead and comment on that and the overall of what happens when we feel that pressure from the outside.
Thank you, Jay. Absolutely. So, Caitlin, I'm going to address yours first. So, it's interesting because there's a little bit of like a dissonance that I have. So, a little bit to what Terry was saying. I've kind of gotten to the point where, and I think for a long time, I just really valued that connection, that belonging. I wanted to spend time, whether it was whatever partner in my life, friends, family, whatever. And I realized I'm like, I really don't want to make an effort to be in rooms where I really don't feel like I belong because there are so many other places where my presence is valued and I feel connected and I leave and my battery is full versus leaving and going, why did I just give 3 hours of my time to people that didn't ask me one question while I was in this room? So there's that dissonance of like, there's times where I'll show up and I want to kind of lead the way, and there's other times where I kind of refrain. But to Caitlin's point, it's interesting. Those are the moments actually, Caitlin, where I want to push you to actually go. So she said she skipped a party the other day to avoid having to explain why she's making herself suffer through 75 hard. If any of you don't know, this is a Andy Frisella challenge. I've done it twice, both in the summer and in the winter. And essentially what this is that you don't drink for 75 days. You have to do two workouts every day, one outdoors. There's all these different things you read. It's just like it's not anything to do with weight loss. It's all to do with mental mindset and mental resilience. What's interesting is that both times I did this, the one in the summer, I had a friend's birthday and they were all on a boat. And my gosh, every single person, why aren't you drinking? Why, who do you think you are? And all these things. And I sat there and I had my water bottle and I was like, you know what, guys? I'm like, I'm doing this program called 75 Hard and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm on day 70 and I don't want to break that spurt. So you guys have a blast. I'm here. I have a blast, whether I'm drinking or not. But it's one of those things where you just never know what kind of ripple effect will come from that. Do you know how many people since that was 3 years ago, I was on that boat. The person that was leading the party has actually been sober for a couple of years because she made a decision to do that. Another person's actually done 75 hard twice since because they were like, hey, I want to try that challenge. You never know who you might inspire. So those are the moments where I say, Caitlin, just go. And who cares if you have to explain? You don't even have to explain anything. You're you. And whether you choose to have a mocktail or whatever it is, or if someone's like, why would you want to do two workouts a day? Because I want to, and that's it. And that's where the boundary actually comes in. It's not having to explain yourself. I'm actually really proud of you. And there's very few people that want to go out and do that program. And whatever it may be, it might just be that, for example, people criticize me all the time for my style. They're like, hey, everyone's in jeans and t-shirt and you're all dressed up because I want to. That's okay. So just that boundary of not having to explain yourself is huge. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, Jay, but those are my thoughts around that.
No, definitely answers the question, and I will tell you, this is something that I will admit I never really had a problem with because when somebody's like, "Jay, I don't like your shirt," I'm like, off. I'm wearing it, not you. I don't care if you like it or not. Like, unless you want it tied around your head, I mean, let's keep talking about. No, I'm just kidding. So when we think about, for me, it is some. Oh, day 72. Congrats, Caitlin. That's awesome. That's by my count, and I speak for a living, but that's 3 more days, and it sounds like you're crushing it. So keep up the great work. I for me, that's one of the thing is I as a fire, and I know that earths and fires kind of experience this. Push us or tell us no or tell us that we have to, and you're probably going to get a very, very strong boundary reaction. And I said reaction and not response because it's not very, it sometimes can come off in a not response method. It can come off in a very reactive method. So for those that are not within that space, really think about, all right, what Francesca said, stepping in and saying, hey, maybe this actually, maybe I meant to set this boundary. Maybe by setting this boundary, I'm going to inspire somebody else to set a boundary. Maybe I'm going to make it okay for that person to look at their choices, their priorities, as Terry was talking about, and say, maybe I need to realign on what is important to me or what's not important to me. So, want to check in with you, audience. What are your questions? Are there specific scenarios? I know we've talked a lot today. We've given some different tactics. We've given some different solutions. Terry, Francesca, kind of open forum here. Is there anything that you want to contribute or add into this conversation, or even the questions that you have? I'm very curious.
I've got one. And I've
All right.
got one specifically for the people who don't like asking for help. Because I have been people that don't like asking for help. And the irony of all of this was I spent a good 6 years teaching people how to do their elevator pitch or 60-second commercial in a way that empowered them to ask for specifically what they needed, which, of course, I already alluded to, I never ever did. Irony. Anyway, this is important. There are two very interesting sub-universal laws that work consistently. One is the law of reciprocity, the other one's the law of generosity. The law of reciprocity basically states, as you do well by me, I am going to go out of my way to return the favor and do well by you. Right? It's the human mechanism. It's why every time your kid has a birthday party, the first thing you do is make them write a bunch of thank you notes and send them off, right? It's the least we can do. On the flip side, there's a law of generosity, which basically states, as you do well by me, the universe is paying attention and it is going to open up in ways that are going to be useful to you. So, by giving someone the opportunity to assist us, we are giving them the opportunity to enact both the law of generosity and the law of reciprocity. Asking for help is an act of giving. And I need you to hear that, contemplate it, run it through your own filter. But at the end of the day, I really would rather you just trust me because I've watched it for 18 years continually show up in that fashion.
Terry, and it's such a good point. And I am one of those people. Um, I am one of those highly, highly, I'm going to call it hyper independent people that just, it never even occurred to me. But what you just said really landed because this is what we talk about when we say, hey, delegation is a gift, feedback is a gift. Asking for help makes a lot of sense because in some cases, and maybe it's the and maybe I'm going to give this a try with a little low pressure help. I might just toss it out there. If anybody's free this weekend, I need to get this tree cut down. If you're free, join me. Beer involved or whatever it is, right? Making it an open ask rather than necessarily a direct of, Francesca, will you come over and help me move this tree? Maybe that's going to feel a little softer for me, maybe like the invitation or the open invitation. And quite frankly, if everybody says no, I was going to do it myself anyways. And if everybody says yes, then I'll have to buy more beer, and that's a good problem to have. So, with that being said, I think that that is kind of a cool way to think about it. I really like that. Francesca, what are your thoughts on that?
I love it. Jay, I know you wanted potentially for me to share a little bit about like each element before we kick off? Do you want me to do that now or wait?
Yeah, actually, let's do that. Give us a quick recap of the elements. It looks like we are coming close to the end of our hour for this lunch and learn. So give us a quick recap on that, and then we can shift to our final thoughts here.
I love it. You might have to mute though because it's echoing.
Oh, excuse that.
Fun stuff. No, no worries. Okay, so I'll give a quick on this. So, how if you're a fire in the audience, throw a yes in the chat or throw a fire so everyone knows where the fires are. For the fire, it's the shift out of not that I want to do this, but does this actually move things forward? So, asking ourselves, is this like I want to make sure I'm focused on the highest impact priority? And I won't be able to take this one on right now, right? So, how to say no to a fire though, because we can be a little spicy. The key is being direct, being clear, and connected to the result. So fires really respect clarity more than softness. So don't give some big, long explanation. I'm not able to take that on, but here's how I can support. Simple. If you're a water, throw a water. I love the fire emojis. Yeah. If you are a water, throw a wave or throw the word water in the chat. So water is going to struggle with no because they are driven by that connection, that care, and relationships. So how waters and lots of waters. I love it. For the water, the shift is understanding. Saying no doesn't break relationships, unclear boundaries do. And a water aligned boundary sounds something as simple as this: I really want to support this. And I also need to be mindful of my capacity right now. Okay. And if you're going to be saying no to a water, acknowledge the relationship. So don't be a fire and just be like, no, that's it. They're like, okay, the water's like, I guess they hate me. But that's not the case. So saying no to a water is acknowledge the relationship, show you're clear. Yeah, show that you care and then be clear. I value this and I can't take it on right now. Or, hey, if you want to skip the acknowledgement, at least make it personal to them. Ronald, I really appreciate everything you're doing for this project. I can't take this on right now, but circle back to me in a week. Okay. If you're high air, throw a little, like, it's like, I don't know if it's a fart emoji or what it is, but throw the air emoji into the chat or the tornado. I love it. Or the blowing wind. Thank you, Judy. So airs are going to struggle with this because they want to, they want all the possibilities. They can't really say no for that matter, but they can if we can have clarity over possibility. So saying something as simple as based on my current priorities, I just can't take this on. So it doesn't need to over explain, just needs to be decided. And how to say no to an error, just giving some reason, be logical, keep it clean, and just say, hey, here's why it's not a fit right now. I love the tornado, Jay. As long as it's not near our property, I'm happy. Earth, okay, so Earth. If you are an Earth, throw a plant or I don't know, dirt. Oh, and the globe, done. Perfect. Okay, so Earths are gonna struggle a bit with this because they're driven by responsibility. They want to do what's expected, right? So how an Earth can say no? Saying no to protect the system doesn't mean that you're gonna break it. So saying something as simple as, I want to make sure this is done well, and I don't have the capacity right now to take it on. So, and how to say no to an Earth? Be structured, be clear, but give reassurance. They want that safety and security, not just the, boom, right? And then saying, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, right. For an Earth, they want to know that things aren't going to fall apart. Okay. So just make sure that you say, here's what is covered and here's what isn't. So I am able to do this, but not this. So something as simple as that. And I'm looking at the chat. Sorry, the fart emoji. I love it. Okay, back to you and Jay, Terry and Jay. I love it.
That's awesome. Thank you for that recap, Francesca. Very thorough and
Rock solid.
definitely something helpful here. So, Terry, your final thoughts of today?
My final thoughts are twofold. Number one, no is a complete and total sentence. Added bonus, it's the shortest one we can utter. Number two, get in the habit of saying yes to less.
I love that. Francesca, final thought?
Oh, don't measure your worth based on what you do, everyone. It's based on who you are. So when you say yes, just ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is so and so can like me, or is because I really want to?
Ooh, love that.
And my final thought on this one is everything that you say yes to, you are saying no to something else. And if you take the 5 minutes, take a step back and say, am I saying no to my family? Am I saying no to my health? Am I saying no to my well-being? Am I saying no to my finances? Am I saying no to whatever it is? You just might have the motivation to draw the boundary that you need to keep yourself going strong. And that's important. So thank you all for joining us in this month's webinar, the Lunch and Learn. Join us next month. We're going to have some exciting announcements. There's some big new products that are going to be coming out of behavioral elements and fun things that you can do with it. We hope that you enjoyed this production, and we cannot wait to see you in May. In the meantime, be safe, be healthy, be well, friends, and take care. Talk soon.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.